After 2 years in France, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon left the country behind for its third season. With Daryl and Carol finally reunited in Season 2, it doesn't matter where they go, because it's the chemistry behind the franchise's best relationship that matters. In Daryl Dixon's Season 3 premiere episode, Costa de Morte, the best friends ended up in London, where they met a man named Julian. After finding out he had a sailboat, they convinced Julian to go with them to America. But alas, they crashed, and Julian's life came to a heartbreaking end. In Daryl Dixon's Season 3's second episode, La Ofrenda, Daryl and Carol are alone again, but they won't be for long. After discovering that they are now in Spain, new friends and enemies are about to be made. How our heroes react to them will change everything.
Daryl saves 2 lives in The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, Season 3, Episode 2.
As the last episode ended, a concussed Carol had walked away from their small shelter, and Daryl was desperately shouting for her. La Ofrenda begins with Carol sitting by a river, a slight smile on her face, as she watches a young man and woman laugh and kiss on the rocks. Their happiness doesn't last long, though, as the woman gets upset by something and walks away. Daryl finds Carol, and together they watch the 2 strangers, who have already made up. "They're so perfect," Carol says. Daryl watches them intently, and upon seeing how much stuff they have, he grabs his crossbow and decides to rob them. However, before he can, a truck pulls up and the young couple hides. They are quickly found by a small group of men carrying guns, who order them to come up. They are asked who they are, and one man puts a gun to the boyfriend's head, but before he can pull the trigger, Daryl lets his crossbow bolts fly, taking out all but one, who escapes in a jeep. Back at the rocks, Daryl and Carol are introduced to the young couple, Roberto and Justina. Daryl asks about finding a doctor to help Carol, and although Justina has a grandmother who is a healer, they don't want to return home because Roberto insists that Justina will be sent away and he'll be killed. Not willing to let Carol die, Daryl pulls out a gun to get his way. The foursome makes their way to an old village in the mountains where we see men leading walkers like cattle into a cage. When stopped by a woman on horseback named Paz, Justina tells her what happened. After a few seconds, they are let inside the town through a large metal gate.
Daryl and Carol traveled to Solaz del Mar in The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, Season 3, Episode 2.
Daryl and Carol are taken to the center of a town where a man comes out onto a balcony. As guns come out, everyone sitting outside flees. Justina tells the man what happened, calling him Uncle Fede. Daryl's got his gun out too, but in an act of trust, Fede has his men lower their weapons before welcoming his guest to Solaz del Mar. Carol is taken to Justina's grandmother, while Fede berates Roberto for running away before something called La Ofrenda starts. Fede officially introduces himself to our heroes as Federico de Ravera, the town's mayor. Because Daryl and Carol are outsiders, they won't be allowed to stay in Solaz del Mar, but Daryl asks for one night until Carol's fever breaks. Justina pleads for them to be allowed to stay, and Roberto's father, Antonio, says they can stay with him as a thank you for saving their children from the bandidos. Fede will give them 2 days, but that's it. Inside Antonio's home, Carol is given a bed, while Roberto fixes dinner. Daryl asks about borrowing tools to fix the boat, but Roberto does him one better. He'll help Daryl fix it if he helps him and Justina leave again. The next morning, Carol is feeling much better. She and Daryl see Roberto and Justina kiss, only to separate when the townspeople notice. As they talk to Alberto, an anxious Paz rides up fast to let him know that El Alcázar is here. Several horses and vehicles ride in as the residents gather in the streets to cheer their arrival. Alberto says the group is the last remnants of the Spanish monarchy. They are led by a waving man standing in a car named Guillermo Torres, who is to be the next king. Every year they visit the northern villages, bring gifts and protection to keep the alliance safe. So what do they want in return? Guillermo presents gifts, but not everyone is happy, as one man shouts and demands to know where his daughter is, before being dragged away by soldiers. Out of one car comes a young woman who is said to be the next queen. She's dressed just like one too, and Paz looks at her with surprise as if she knows this woman, who now smiles and nods her way. Alberto explains what Guillermo's people want in return. La Ofrenda is a lottery where one of the town's young women is sent with El Alcázar and married into the group. After that, they're never seen again. Roberto says that this is what they are running from. There's good reason, because in the town square, the man who created the disturbance is being tortured by Guillermo's man.
Carol isn't happy with the town's traditions in The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 3 Episode 2. Talking later, Daryl wants to stay out of it and focus on getting home, but Carol wants to help. The next morning, the young women of the town are being dressed in their finest clothes, including a scared girl named Alba. The future queen walks in to look everyone over when she notices Paz again on the street below. Once more, they look at each other with recognition and smile. As the ceremony begins, the women are taken outside, and everyone gathers around Fede. The lottery involves a pig race down the street, with a woman's name attached to each of them. Whichever pig wins leads to the corresponding woman being chosen. Today, that name is Alba. Justina and Roberto are relieved, but Alba looks terrified as her mother cries beside her. As everyone dances in the streets, Daryl talks to Paz, who admits that she helped Roberto and Justina escape. Helping feed the pigs, Daryl notices that Justina is sneaking off to meet with the future queen. They do, in fact, know each other, and that's why the queen, who we now know is named Ilana, came along. From the way they look at each other, are they former lovers? That night, the town gathers for a large dinner outdoors. Fede talks to Daryl and Carol about how they came to Spain from America. Guillermo wonders if there's news from other parts of the world, so they tell them about how no one is left in London. Fede is impressed to know that they run a community back in America, but instead of just taking the compliment, Carol criticizes the old traditions of this town. Fede says Solaz is a melting pot that has prospered like few others for a reason. As Justina says goodbye to Alba, Guillermo sees how his wife looks at her. She fixes that by speaking about how great the tradition has been, and she's the living proof. But Carol wonders how unthinkable it is to say goodbye to their child like this. Will she regret being so critical of those who are helping her? It's then that Daryl notices the man who survived the attack on Roberto and Justina at the beginning of the episode. He quietly follows after him and the two other men he's with in the darkness. They've seen Daryl, and they're looking for him too, but now armed with a blade he found. He's the one stalking them. The men stand at a city wall, looking down into the cage that holds the walkers, when Daryl creates a distraction to separate them. He quickly attacks and kills the men, letting the one he followed fall into the walker cage rather than saving him. What's going to happen when the town finds out what happened?